Brandon Peacock, welcome to the It's Not That Deep podcast, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Long overdue.
Very long overdue, my brother. We've been trying to set this up for what seems like 9-10 months now.
I'm in better shape now, though. I'm in a better space. So
Oh, yeah.
now I've got a little bit more free time as well.
Definitely. And we'll get into all that, why you're in better shape and everything. But, dude, I first want to say thank you for coming here, man. You're the first guest in the new studio, as you know.
Looks
You've
amazing.
seen it all come together. And I'm really excited that, I feel like you're a part of the process, man.
I hope so. Man, I feel like I'm enough part of a process. I took that Patriots mug out for today, so I hope you don't mind that. Now that we're started, I can get away with it.
He removed it, and I did not know about it, and I will not forgive him for that. But we're gonna move on from it and continue the podcast. Bro, you have one of the most insane stories that I've ever heard especially from someone I personally know. I remember Jamie, our good friend, my business partner, and he's known you for a lot longer. He's my roommate, he's my good fucking friend. He tells me one day, he's like, look, you have to get this guy on the podcast. Like, you absolutely have to. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, he's told me about some people to get on the pod before, and I'm like, all right, yeah, what's he all about? And he's like, dude, you need to hear his story. So I'm not gonna I won't do justice telling your story, so I'm gonna let you just get into it. Tell us what happened, man.
Yeah, I've told it so many times, and I'm sure so many people listening to this have heard it. So I'll try to keep it relatively brief, and then we can kind of get into some of the actual, background of everything. But basically, just over a year ago today, it's like a year and 2 months almost, walking in to get my haircut, and I got caught in the middle of a drive-by shooting, innocent bystander. As I always make very clear, because that's always something that people always ask right away, right?
Right.
Totally.
What would you do?
Yeah, 100%. It's like, why were they shooting at you, man?
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, innocent bystander, literally going to get a haircut. Got caught up in the middle of a drive-by shooting, hit 3 times. So once in my left leg, which was not too bad. Once in the chest, which actually ended up being kind of a non-factor. Like, it broke all my ribs, but I mean, at the end of the day, what are ribs, right?
Who needs ribs? breathing overrated.
Yeah, it took me about a week and a half to breathe again, but I couldn't move, so it was the worst that could happen. But I took one bullet right through the femoral artery that ripped right through my femur, and I was basically 30 seconds from death because of the high bleed out there, right? And that left me with pretty significant damage over the long term. I've got pretty bad compartment syndrome in the leg now. As you've seen, it's pretty deformed too. Maybe stronger than the average leg now. I've got that, my tibialis anterior is so big, that's kind of overcompensated for some of the deficiencies I have in there now. But yeah, it's been a wild year and a bit, and we could talk about kind of whatever you want, but that's the background of everything, right?
Well, where do you start, man? First of all, you got shot 3 times. We kind of joked about it the other day, you're 1/3 the way of 50 Cent.
We joke about it every day, man. You have to.
You have to. And that's one thing that we'll definitely talk about is your mindset and attitude about all this. But talk me through those first initial days of after you just got shot and you have no idea what's going on or why it happened or all that stuff. Talk to me about what that was like, man.
Yeah, the first night is the most difficult, I think, by far. You've got you've got death facing you right in the eyes. You don't know if you're going to wake up the next morning. I literally went into surgery having no idea if I'd see the next day, right?
Yeah.
And that's obviously, there's horror in that, but there's also kind of some peace, right? And I think what's really cool is when you go through something like that, you get to see you get all these things that you think about, you wonder about. You're like, what would my last thought be? What would be the most important things to me in a time like this? You can't experience it until you go through it, right? And obviously I kind of was able to come to terms with what my core values were. And it was honestly amazing in a weird way, right? Obviously, I wish no one else has to go through it. Yeah. And I would I go through it again to get to where I am now? 100%,
yeah.
Which is crazy to say, but I recovered really well. Right. But the night of was really difficult, but it's the most difficult because I'm trying to reach out to my friends and to my family and let them know I'm going to be okay.
Right.
In my mind, I'm not dying.
Yeah.
I've got so much left, right? There's no way I'm going to let myself go just for something as silly as 3 bullets. What the hell are 3 bullets, right? So the night of, I was super optimistic.
Nice.
And my biggest concern was reaching out to my friends, my family, letting them know, hey, I'm going to be okay, right? I actually called my mom the night of, before the police took the phone from me, because big no, you're not supposed to call anybody when you're involved in a gang shooting.
Okay.
But again, I called my mom just to let her know, like, hey, it's gonna sound crazy, I got shot, I'm gonna be all right, don't stress, but I wanted you to hear from me.
Yeah.
Because that was at the top of my mind, right? It was like, I know the second she hears this, she's gonna lose it, right?
Yeah, of course.
As any mom would.
Yeah.
So my like entire thought at that moment was, get this information to her, and then you can start to relax a little bit, then you can start to just focus on surviving and not have to worry about keeping everybody else under control, I guess.
And that's kind of an underrated part about going through some kind of traumatic experience like that, is like, you want everyone else to kind of have a little bit of that comfort that, like, hey, like, even though you don't actually know, but
no idea. Yeah,
you're like, I'm good, I'm gonna be okay, I'm gonna get through this, but like, you can't actually like for sure know, because you're kind of at the mercy of like a bunch of different factors. You don't know exactly where these bullets hit or what exactly is going on. You just got doctors and experts and whatever telling you, like, okay, like, you're going into surgery, blah blah blah, you're gonna wake up and then you're gonna feel like you got hit by a truck, but then you're gonna come out of it and you're gonna be okay. Like, and relaying that to your loved ones that's got to be tough, man. That takes a lot of courage. Like, on top of like, obviously being shot, like, that's the part that you don't have in your control, but the way you're able to kind of react to that, pretty admirable, man.
Yeah, it's difficult, but I think once you can kind of like inspire that hope in everybody around you, like, I think the doctors probably like knocked their hope down a little bit. I think they told my parents I had like a 50-50 shot at survival that night. And they basically said, like, my mom and dad were under the impression that, like, Brandon, if he does wake up, if we're lucky enough for him to wake up, this guy's not waking up with a leg. He's toast. Like, his right leg is getting chopped off.
Yep.
And I was never under that impression. Like, in my mind, that was never even a realistic possibility. I think the last thing I said to my surgeons going into surgery was, do what you got to do, kill me if you have to, but do not chop off this leg. Right.
Okay.
I think that maybe I would have been able to respond positively had that been the outcome. Right. But in my mind at the time, it wasn't a thought. I knew how my body felt. I was feeling good, positive. There was no doubt. I didn't realize how serious it was. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing to have to go through. And obviously the first couple of days in the hospital they're weird. Like, it's hard to, like, I don't want to say they were bad. They weren't the worst days of my life by any means. I think they're just kind of days you have to deal with, right? Like, you wake up and you could be miserable. Like, your life could be ruined because you went through this crazy thing, or you could look at it and be like, damn, I'm so lucky. I woke up. I'm going to have a chance to recover if I go out there. I put in the work, I put in the time, the effort, and then you can run with that, right? And I use that right off the bat as something to motivate me, but also something to bring me kind of some peace and some solace from what I went through. Was like, no matter how bad people might be looking, and you're getting the empathy from everybody in the world. Like, oh my God, I can't imagine like what you're going through. I feel so sorry for you. Like, it must be so tough. I'm like, man, feel sorry for my family. They're the ones who have to see this from the outside.
Right.
I'm good. I'm in control. Like, I've got a second chance. This is amazing. Right. So like, it's super hard to put into words, because I feel like you can't really appreciate it until you go through it, as cliche as that is to say. But yeah, that was kind of like, that was the biggest thing. Waking up the next morning, there was no like I wasn't sad. Well, it didn't break me. I was happy, right?
I think from the first time that I heard about your story, and then what you've done after that, which I can't wait to talk about. Like, I'm itching to talk about it, but like, you actively chose, like, you made a decision. Like, this wasn't just, you chose not to be a victim.
Yeah.
And that's something that, I think like should be the biggest takeaway from this podcast.
I agree. Yeah.
Is that you made an active decision. It wasn't just like, like you did a little bit of work after and you decided, like, you know what, like, this thing happened and I was really down about. No, like, you're describing the day of, just knew that, okay, like, this happened. It sucks.
Yep.
Now what?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two parts I kind of want to touch on that. And one, I think that attitude and that mindset that I was fortunate enough to have has been like ingrained in my head since I was like 2 years old. Right. Okay. My parents, especially my dad, was a very anti-victim mindset guy. I never came from really like a place of privilege or anything like everybody. I have my own unique privileges for sure that I was born with. But I wouldn't say I was really that much ahead of anybody else in any
Right.
field.
You weren't coddled.
I wasn't, oh my God, I was so far from coddled,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it was very important to my dad, at least growing up, for me to never take on that victim mindset. It was something that was, just for perspective, the word struggling was something that I now relish. I love to struggle in things.
Yeah.
But that was like, if I ever had a tough time doing something growing up, my dad would be like, you struggling with that? And he'd pick at me and just pick at me.
Okay.
And then eventually you learn, you don't be the victim. You don't struggle at it. You use that struggle, you use it to fuel you, and you get better, right? You grow from it. So that's something that's amazing. And I think that, shout out to him. He probably won't listen to this, but if he did, that mindset is fully, put in my brain from him. I don't remember the second thing I was going to say. So
all good, man. We'll circle
I'm
back
too passionate about that.
No, but I'm completely with you on that, man. And that and I almost feel like, more so in today's like world and society, you're seeing it like even with people like myself, like I'm manufacturing struggle.
Yeah.
I'm making struggle in my day-to-day life.
Yep.
And I'm making things a little bit intentionally challenging for myself to just kind of weed out those inner like demons that just tell you to be complacent and just chill out and just, woe is me, or, oh, well, X happened to me, so therefore I get to do Y.
Yeah.
Right. But
that's actually what I was going to say. My second point was literally that once you go through some of the biggest, obstacles in your life, you can find so much solace and value and purpose in struggle, right? Like struggle is the most beneficial thing to your long-term success.
Yeah.
When you give up that short-term gratification, that short-term joy, and you really go after something that will change your life, but it's going to suck to do. It's the most empowering thing you can ever go through. And that's why, people say you're crazy because you say you'd go through this again. I would in a heartbeat, because that was my rock bottom, like that was the most difficult obstacle I've ever had to come through and come out of. And I came out of it probably 100 times better person than I was back, a year and a bit ago. So I think that when you say manufacturing struggle, I think that's amazing. I think that is something that everybody should be doing, and you should be taking on these difficulties and embracing them and using them to grow and change your life. Right. There's nothing better than that to me, at least.
So talking now about kind of, what you did after you healed up enough to be able to kind of get out of the hospital, and now what?
Yeah. There was, that's a big hill. So like there was a lot of steps on that way, right? Like getting out of the hospital, I had to prove that I could walk up 2 steps. Okay. So like I could barely walk for more than 2 minutes. Like my ribs were all broken. My right leg was destroyed. My left leg was still, healing from a bullet wound, and a surgery that cut the whole thing open and took a vein out. Right. So it was in no means in great shape, but that was my good leg. Right. So there was a lot of obstacles to overcome on that kind of path. I wasn't, like I said, once I got home from the hospital, I had to take a full week of bed rest because my wounds were so massive that if I was to even try to walk, they'd break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you kind of got to restart
the whole process.
1 step forward, 3 steps back kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So like I'm itching to just do everything I can to move, and I couldn't even leave my bed. Like, and it was so bad. Like I'm saying, like I couldn't get out of my bed to move 2 steps to go to the washroom that was across the hall. Like it was, I literally could not move like a step
on a much smaller scale on my end, not to like look at me, no, but like when I tore my Achilles, obviously not even like comparable in terms of the
it's
level
always
of
comparable,
trauma.
man. Like trauma is different, but the impact on your body, that's massive. But don't discount that.
Fair. But what I was like I relate to that, what you're talking about right there, so much, in that like I just want to get right back into it. So I remember like I had to like stay with my parents, right? Because like, and I'd always been an independent dude before that.
Same exact thing.
I'd moved out. I'm like completely independent, doing my own thing. And this happens, and I'm like, well, my building's up 3 flights of stairs. Like that's not gonna work. So I gotta live with my parents and kind of be taken care of, which mentally is a hard thing. I think we could talk about that in a sec. But, but talking about like wanting to get right back after it, I remember like I had some like kettlebells and like just a bunch of like little stuff, and I just like do upper body stuff or like try as quickly as I can. Like I still got the boot on.
I remember seeing you do that, and like shout out to you. That's a lot of respect, because that's a lot harder than people would give it credit for. When
Appreciate
you just see
that,
it
man.
on, you know, Instagram, whatever. You're like, oh, he's just using his arms. It's like your whole body is destroyed when you go through an injury like that.
And more importantly, your mind.
Yep.
Like your mind can easily get destroyed, and you can easily, what we were talking about a second ago, go, woe is me.
Yep.
And like, well, you know, I'm going to eat my feelings, or I'm going to just binge Netflix now, or like, no, I'm like, you know what? Like, this is some much needed time that I could use to write or do this, or like, you know, like I could still do some stretches. You know, my other leg's fine. Why can't I do some single leg stuff or like whatever? But coming back to like what you're saying there is like how frustrating was it that like you still couldn't do that yet? Like you still actually had to give the wound time to heal.
Yeah, that was frustrating, and it's something I've talked about too. Like you know about it, but for the people, the listeners, maybe like in my first 3 days in the hospital, that sensation was so bad, that inability to move, and I had the same thing as you. I was restless. All I wanted to do was get back and start working on my recovery.
Yep.
And you can't. So what I started doing is I started just taking as many painkillers as I could. Knock me out. I'm asleep. In my head, I'm dreaming. I'm running around. Everything's totally normal, okay. Right? And
you
it was
went
like
to dreamland.
I went to dreamland, you know, and that was kind of like my escape because I couldn't move. And then day 3, I literally realized, I was like, holy shit, this is insane. Like I'm gonna become addicted to this stuff. Like this is me falling into that woe is me mindset, right? And as much as I kept telling myself when I was awake I wasn't doing that, I started to realize I was falling into that trap, right? So what I started doing, similar but a little different, is like I couldn't do kettlebells. Like I literally could not move enough to move my arms.
Your shoulder, your ribs are all messed up.
My ribs are all messed up. I got a bullet hole in my shoulder. Both my legs are toast. Like my right arm was okay enough for me to like take my phone and text with it, you know? Yeah. Like that was about the best I could do. So I started reading. Like I opted out of like all my pain medication on day 3, other than nerve pain management, which is, it doesn't really impact your brain. But the nerve pain was like so bad I couldn't sleep that was critical. Yeah. But I opted out of kind of like the painkiller medication, so I could, like the morphine or like the Tylenol 3 or whatever they gave you. Dilaudid. Yeah. Morphine and Dilaudid were the two that I was on, and Percocet I think at one point as well. But basically, you know, whatever they give me, I was taking at the start, right? Yeah, of course. And then I opted out of it and then switched gears entirely. So I got my mom to bring in like 7 books, and I just started crushing books all day, because it was an opportunity for me to take advantage of that time that I had lost in the past, right? It's difficult when you're working, when you're seeing your friends, when you're in sports, doing all this stuff, to find time to read and work on these other kind of like growth opportunities. Yeah. So I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything else. Now was the time to take advantage of that, right? So to me, that was like, you doing kettlebells and working your upper body, like that was my next best thing, was like exercising the mind. Yep. And which is a muscle, man. Hell yeah, people got to start treating it like more of a muscle, man. You can train your mind. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But that's what got me back into like a good enough place to get out of the hospital, to move forward, and to come at things with such a positive attitude. Because I think I was really positive right out of the gate, but I easily see how I could have fallen down that trap, that rabbit hole that would have led me the other way, right? And that's why I want to use my story to like, you know, inspire as many people as I can. I think inspiration is amazing, but like from a personal standpoint, I've had so many people reach out with their own unique stories that ended differently, that now I can kind of help these people and show them like, you're not alone, man. I get how tough it's going to be. Yeah. I get that struggle. Here's how you get out of it. You know, here's how I found a way to get out of it. Like, how can we tailor a custom plan to you to help you have a similar sort of bounce back. Right. So that's something that became really important to me too. And, you know, was a luxury I otherwise wouldn't have had, right? The ability to connect with a lot of these people. Absolutely, man. So next steps are now literally trying to take some steps, right? So what was that like then, getting to a point where I'm like, okay, you know, you're like, I can move a bit. I can walk. Thank God I can walk. Yeah. And now what's that like? How painful is it? How are you dealing with it mentally? Like now? Like today? No, back or then. like you're talking like July, like August. Yeah. Out of the hospital now. Yeah. Out of the just only reading books phase, like now it's time to start your rehab. Again. Yeah. Like, walking, rehab, movement. Yeah. What's that like for you in that time period? Yeah, you know, that was obviously, it was exciting, right? I had that opportunity to start my life again, right? Almost. And so like we pushed physio really, really hard. Like there was some days like where I was still hopping in on crutches, but like kind of able to move a little bit better.
Yeah.
Where Frank, my physio, was literally like bending my leg behind my head, like pushing it into my back, like my heel into my back. Just going, that was way more painful than getting shot, by the way, the physio and the recovery.
Of course, because now you got all the scar tissue.
Oh my God,
all
the scar
muscles
tissue,
are destroyed.
the nerves are all destroyed.
Nerves,
like
yeah.
I had a lot of problems that that might go overlooked compared to like a regular, you know, broken leg or whatever, right?
Yeah, because people probably in their head, like people even like me who haven't gotten shot, think that getting shot is the worst part. It's like,
getting shot's a joke, man. Like
getting shot's probably like the endorphins and everything probably just keep you like, I mean,
oh my God, your adrenaline's so high. Like I've been through more pain probably 50 times in my life in sports and random injuries than getting shot causes pain. It's the aftermath that really gets you.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, we pushed really hard. We beat that initial timeline to get me walking by like 6 weeks.
Wow.
Maybe like 4 or 5.
So let's sorry, if timeline wise, let's rewind a little bit and talk about, okay, you've had a very unique support system.
I do,
helping you out in your recovery.
Yep.
Talk about how that all came about and why you've been kind of lucky to have that, and then what you've kind of done with it.
Yeah, you know, I say it a lot, and I think like if there was a guy to get shot, I'm probably one of the best candidates, right? To get shot and survive with the opportunity to recover.
Yeah.
I was super fortunate. Like literally, Frank Duquette, I've said his name 100 times. If you've seen our TikTok, you know it. That guy like brought me back from the dead, right? He just graduated physio school, was on CERB because he couldn't take his national exam. So he couldn't work as a practicing physio at the time.
Right.
Because of COVID, everything, the exam got pushed back.
Yeah.
So I was literally his summer project. Like we were such good boys. He was one of the first guys to reach out, obviously, when everything happened, like one of my first priorities to get back to, as everything kind of unfolded. And he basically, with smiles and open arms too, you know, it wasn't like a shit, like Peacock's coming over today, like I don't have time for this. It was like, you are my priority one. We're getting you back. It was fun for him. He was able to learn. Yeah. And he took it like as you would like a member of your family, right? Like one of your own. Yeah. Literally brought me back to health. And that was massive for me because I have a guy now I trust. And, you know, when I'm going through this immense pain, he's like, great. Like, that's good. Pain's good. All that's good. Do you want to sit here and cry about the pain, or do you want to get back to full Peacock that I know you can get to?
It's not the normal relationship with the physio where it's kind of like a clinical transactional thing.
Yeah. They're scared. They don't want to hurt you too much so you don't come back. Like
exactly. And at the same time, they don't want to give you like any kind of aggressive, like they don't tailor it to the person, right? They don't know like, hey, no, you know me.
Yeah.
If this timeline says 12 weeks to being able to, I don't know, walk, whatever.
Yeah.
I want it to be 4. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
well, and he was the best for that. Like literally, like we'd been at his house, I want to say like literally 1 week. Okay. So this is, I couldn't walk for the first 2 weeks in hospital. I couldn't move. And then when I got home, they gave me a week before they let me like even try to like move at all. Right. With a walker, like just like hobbling, like barely able to move, but still moving.
Yeah.
And the second I got to Frank's, I'm like literally the first day, literally like wheelchaired up. Like my dad basically threw me over his shoulder, like bring me to the house. Then Frank throws me over his shoulder, brings me into the basement gym and gets going, right? Like I am an inanimate object that's just there to be stretched.
Yeah.
And by like day 5, we're walking around the basement with crutches now, you know, like we're slowly moving. And then I think it was I want to say day 4 or 5 where I just got so far ahead of myself that Frank's not looking. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to try to walk. Like I'm not even on crutches yet. Like I should not be walking.
Yeah.
But I'm like, screw it. You know, whatever. Like I'm pretty strong. Like here we are. I'm alive. I'm going to walk. So I go and Frank like comes back downstairs right as I start doing it. I'm like holding on. There's like a pole in his basement. I'm holding on to it and I'm starting to move and put a little pressure on the like gunshot wound leg. He looks at me. I look at him. We're just like 2 deer in the headlights. Like, what the hell are you doing, man?
Yeah.
Like this is going to destroy your entire leg.
Yeah.
So we kind of held back, you know, it was like, that was the only moment of physio where it was like, this might be too far.
Yeah.
But then we kind of slowly started getting there. Yeah. And then like, I want to say like 3 days later, like super soon, I was able to take my first steps, you know? Yeah. And then like 2 days after that,
wow,
I'm moving at a super slow pace. When moving, Frank takes my crutches, like literally takes my crutches, sends me back out to my dad, who's driving me over there every day, and says, yeah, no more crutches. And I'm like, I'm mind blown, right? I can barely move at this point.
Yeah.
My dad's looking at him like, I don't know if I trust this guy anymore.
Yeah.
Like, this guy's taking away your crutches. You can barely move.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way you can walk around for 100 steps. And my dad was irate. I've told Frank that, actually. I think it's kind of funny. He was irate. He's like, I don't trust this guy. We're getting you to another physio. Like, we're doing all this other stuff. I need a second opinion. And it was the best thing he ever did, because it forced me to just start walking. And I was slowly but surely moving a little more each day.
Yeah.
And then I started walking down the street from my parents' house to like Starbucks or something, which again, they didn't love because they saw that I was pushing myself pretty hard.
Right.
But it was great. It was just like literally taking away the crutches to my success.
Yeah.
Got me there probably like 4, 5, 6 weeks ahead of just where I would be walking.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
That is wild. It's crazy that the crutch literally becomes metaphorically the crutch.
Yep.
And like, you know, it's so funny that like that's the thing that's recommended, because the way our healthcare system, and look, I don't want to I don't want to put our healthcare system down, because it's amazing. It's, you know, it got you to that point, right?
Save me hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical bills too, right? We've got great stuff, but there's more.
That's not my point.
Yeah.
But, you know, after that, it's like, okay, how can we tailor this recovery to the individual? How can we push this person to who it is? If you're a sedentary, old, like 85-year-old lady who just, you know, got shot in the leg, you're not going to take away her crutches. That is like, that's
crazy.
Probably abuse at that point, right? But if you got a young, healthy dude who's like willing to get after it, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if you don't have your crutches is like, you realize like, I actually kind of needed them, dude.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't get up like this little ramp thing, and like I hurt myself, and this set me back a couple of days. But guess what? I'm only gonna use one crutch now. And like so like it's still a net positive thing to be able to push yourself further than you think you can.
When it takes away that mental excuse, right? Like you've got that mental obstacle whenever you have crutches of, I'm gonna depend on these crutches. At least I have them. So when you start walking again, you're like, oh well, I'm a little tired. I'm gonna go to my crutches, right? It's human instinct. It's default. If you have that, you're gonna use it, right? No matter how hard your mindset is, how driven you are. Yeah. If it's there,
well,
it makes your life easier.
My physio told me that I gotta use these, so I'm not gonna go against my physio. Yeah. Which is actually like common, like that's the common like way of thinking about something like this.
Dude, 100%, man. You're like, well, WebMD said that this was the way to go, so like, what am I gonna do? Bash WebMD? It was like, no, it was like, there was no way for me to not recover in that light. And then from there, the recovery just expedited big time, right? Mm-hmm. The second those crutches were taken away, now it was, well, I have no more excuses. I can't just sit in bed. Physio says I'm good enough to go. Yeah. Let's go. Right. And I started walking up and down my stairs every day.
Now, did your surgeon or doctor or whatever have, because you know you have to have meetings with them, right? Like follow-up meetings with them after.
Every week, yeah.
Were they like what was their attitude towards this?
Yeah, like when I'd walk in there, like no crutches after like a month, they were super positive, man. Like from the start, like I think what was cool about like my entire medical team was, other than, you know, maybe one or two of them, none of them wanted to hold me back, right? There was no like fear, there was no like coddling where it's like, well, you know, like you just went through something really difficult, like we want to make sure you're taking it slow and you're easing back into it. Right. They were all like ortho was basically get after it, right? Like they ortho wanted me to walk on day 2. I shit you not. Came into the room, looked at me and said, "All right, get up." And all the other doctors, plastics, general, the vascular, they were like, "You're insane. Like this kid, like we're not standing this kid up right now. He can't move anything."
Well, when my Achilles, I had a similar experience with ortho. It's like this dude, like he was actually the opposite ortho wise. He was like completely conservative in terms of recovery, and he was just like, "You got to do the surgery." Yeah, I opted out. That's a whole different story. I said, not doing that.
That's what I want to hear tonight, because I think that's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, and then he was like, "There's no way that you should be walking this quickly." I'm like, I'm gonna walk. I feel fine. Like I feel okay. You got to keep the boot on for another 4 weeks. Yep. Boot was off. Don't need it. I'm gonna wear my shoes and keep the heel thing in, like keep my foot on in plantar flexion.
Yep.
Like, yo, what is your advice?
Yep.
And so like I started becoming skeptical about everything that, and like it's not this dude in particular. He's following a procedure. He wants another BMW. He wants to
Yep.
do a surgery. Like I get it. Like I get it. I get the system, right?
Yeah.
But following a cookie cutter prescription on how to heal
Yep.
with something like the human body is so like against, and I'm sure you know this now, against any type of like way we should be going about the steps once you're outside of the hospital.
Yep.
Recovery, like it's completely broken, that system.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's oftentimes the system's created for you to become dependent on it, right? And I think, like you hit it perfectly before. Everyone's got such a unique recovery path. Everyone's going to experience things totally different, and it all does depend on the severity of your injuries. Like there's a million different factors, right? For me, I was very fortunate that I had the opportunity, similar to you, to say, you know, screw it. Let's go. Let's work. The second that you're going to give me the opportunity to seize this, I'm going to take advantage of it and I'm going to run with it. Right.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky in the same way that I think you were really lucky in your recovery process. But you know, it was a lot of effort. And I think for the most part, like even my surgeons who were at the start kind of like, okay, like this kid can't walk. It's day 2. That's insane. And I feel like the bullet hole in my femur was probably enough to be like, okay, this kid actually shouldn't be walking. Like a hole in the femur is definitely not great.
Yeah. Biggest bone in the body.
Yeah,
right?
man. A hole in the middle of it can't be good. I can't imagine, at least. I'm not a doctor, but didn't feel great on my leg.
Yeah.
But you know, they have different views and methods of what's best. Like for example, I was supposed to get a skin graft to cover up like a massive incision I had on my calf.
Yeah.
And plastics just kind of said, fuck it. They're like, well, you know, like it doesn't look great. Like we might have to wait a couple extra days for surgery. Let's just stitch it up. And, you know, like I'm not a doctor. Like I don't know anything. I'm sitting there and my parents were so adamantly against it. I actually talked to my mom yesterday. They're like, skin graft's safer, you know, like it's a tried procedure. It's very like, we don't know if the stitches will stay. Like it's a pretty big wound. Plastics was like, it might not work, but like, if it doesn't work, fuck it. We'll just skin graft it then. Yeah. Aesthetically, it'll look way better if we go this way. I'm like, all right, I'm in. You know, let's do it. Like I want to make sure I come out of this looking as, you know, somewhat human as I can, right? Like you can probably see. I'll show you after, but it looks great now, right? It's just like
I could barely tell, except for the actual spot where you got shot.
That's pretty gnarly.
But I actually think it looks kind of badass. But that's separate from the point. But the leg looks normal, dude.
Oh, 100%. It's the tan that now that I'm tan in the summer, it kind of like it contrasts well. Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's wild to see kind of the differing opinions, which I think is great too, right?
You need multiple opinions. You shouldn't, there's no cookie cutter solution again.
Yep.
I want to switch gears a bit, man, and talk about now what you've been able to do post recovery, getting back to beyond 100%, I would say. And this foundation that you've started, man. Talk about it.
Yeah, you know, I don't know if you can ever really hit 100%. I think that's one thing I've learned where like you've always got room for growth, right? Like I think physically I'm in better shape probably than I was going in.
That's really what I meant. Yeah.
So like, I mean, with that being said, I've still definitely got some issues in the right leg, but I feel great. But yeah, what we've been doing now is I didn't want to just let this be something that defined me in a negative way, right? There is kind of a cool kind of catch in being that guy who got shot, you know, like people know it, like that's kind of the way you're labeled and you fall into that label, which is all right. But I didn't just want to be that random guy who got shot in Ottawa, who you hear about through your buddies. I wanted to be that guy who like took that and then used it to make a difference, right? Used
that guy
it to do
at the dive
really cool.
bar who's 45 talking about when he got shot, like, you know, like
hey, yeah, you remember that? Remember when I was 24, 23? I got shot. Yeah, like I was that guy. Like, get out of here.
You decided
weirdo.
Not to be that guy.
Yeah, 100%, man. Yeah. I decided that was so far from how I wanted to play it, and you know, I take a lot of pride in it for sure. Going through what I went through and recovering to the point I did, it was obviously very difficult. But I didn't want that to be my entire persona, right? I think that would be pretty sad, honestly.
Yeah.
So what I did is we started this group, Hit the Ground Running, which obviously you know about, but some of your listeners might not. And basically what we're trying to do there is we're trying to take not just my story, but my story and the story of a ton of others who've been through similar things to what I've gone through in the last year, and flip it for the positives. So one thing we really did notice in my recovery that I was very fortunate for, like you talked about, was the physio care that I got. None of that was covered, right? There was no government program for kids who get shot or, adults who get shot, whatever. It's just, there's a massive lack in funding, right?
Yeah.
So what we wanted to do is we wanted to take that, take my story along with a couple other stories we have in the city, who've, people who kind of mentored me through everything. We wanted to take that and use it to grow a platform to raise money for trauma survivors, to cover cost of physio, functional strength training, psychotherapy as well, because that's another big one we didn't talk about too much. But the mental impact of going through something like that is massive, right? Yeah. Even for someone like me, who I think responded relatively well, there's still, like, it's changed my entire life, right? There was a massive time in my life where every day I walked outside with extreme anxiety, horrified of what could happen to me, right? So we wanted
changes your view on the world.
Oh my God,
you want
completely.
To get a haircut.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like you put yourself in that situation.
In Ottawa, man. We're not in Baltimore.
Like
there's a lot, Baltimore is probably not even the worst place. There's tons of places. We're not in a war-torn country. We're in a great place in Canada.
Yeah.
And this shit can happen to you. So it changes your perspective for sure. Mm-hmm. But you can spin it, right? You can use that and you can get past it. And I was really fortunate to have the opportunity to do that. But I want to make sure that as many people as I can impact in a positive way and give them that same opportunity and really just give them the tools, I guess, because I can't really control how they think or what they do, but I can show them what worked for me, what's worked for many others who have different response patterns to me,
right? And
how we can get there. So that's really what I wanted to do with Hit the Ground Running, and to surround all that. A big thing for me was, like you said, I'm a guy who likes to push kind of the barriers, right? So I was trying to think what's one of the coolest things I can do to overcome and show that my leg is back to 100%, and that was to run a marathon, right? So we're a week out from that. That's going to be a lot of fun, and we've done really great in our virtual run we've organized now. I think we got around 100 people, maybe a little bit more, going for that next week.
And that's going to grow exponentially, man.
I think so. It's just the base, man.
This is the first one. Yeah. This is the first year where you're proving it to yourself.
100%, man. I'm horrified.
This is one of the big things that I really wanted to talk about today, is that you're putting yourself on the line in such an insane way, dude. Like you and obviously you got an amazing support system. I mean, Jamie's running this marathon with you. All the boys are running this marathon with you. Yeah. I'm not running the marathon with you.
You got your torn Achilles, man. You doing a 5K is good enough in my books.
I'm not running a marathon, and I despise running, but I'm here for you in the cause, dude. And I'm so I absolutely am I'm so inspired by this, man. It actually, I don't really sit and tell you this or gas you up on it. I think you probably got enough of that in your life, but it really, really deeply inspires me, bro. No pun intended. It really inspires me that you got shot just over a year ago, and here you are doing what over 99% of the population would not attempt to do. And you weren't supposed to be able to walk. You weren't supposed to have a leg.
Yeah, that's true.
And here you are, a week out from running this marathon. I know you're going to crush it. You could probably do an extra 10K after it because of the shape that you're in and the miles that you've already put in, training for this and the mindset behind that. So big ups to you, man. Kudos to you, bro. I'm super excited for what Hit the Ground Running is going to be able to accomplish from the checkbox part of it, right? Because that is how society works. Is once this is over, once you're over doing the marathon and all the press, and you're going to be a way bigger podcast than this and people talking about this, and you're going to be coaching people, and this foundation is going to grow and blow up and impact people globally, trauma survivors globally, not just here in Canada. I see that all happening for you, and that just speaks such volumes to going back to the day that you were shot, just flipping that switch and being I'm good.
Yeah. Hey man, well, I appreciate that it inspires you. Obviously that's not the intention for me, but I think it's something that's really cool, right? And that's where I take a lot of pride in my unique recovery, but also what we've been able to do is if I can create a platform where I inspire people to get out there and better themselves, that's literally the best thing I could ask for coming out of this, right? If there's a way that me living my life can make other people get to their best self, there is nothing more. I would go through it 100 more times going through what I went through to get to that point, right? I think that's the most self-fulfilling thing that you could ever have, right?
Well, you've got a mission beyond you now.
100%. That's where it's amazing. It seriously is, and it's something that's really hard to understand when you're not in that position. But it's so great that I can inspire others in just doing what I would have probably done regardless, right? And I was able to do that because of how much my friend group and the people in my close circles have inspired me in this recovery process, right?
Yeah.
I understand the value that comes from being able to lean on the people in your life and you know, that constant positive support and seeing other people do it. Like, I see what you're doing here. You're killing it too, right? In your own right. You're a guy who inspires me with a lot of the stuff that you've done. Jamie, same thing. I would have loved to have him on here, but
we'll do another one, man. We'll run it back.
Hell yeah, man. But you know, seeing the work and the time and the effort that you guys put into the crafts that you want to perfect, that's inspiring to me, right? And I think being able to feed off people like that is the most important thing for self-growth, because there's going to be days where you're not motivated, where you feel like shit, where you don't want to get out there at 5 a.m. like you're doing. Kudos to you, because I could never do that.
You could.
I could.
You could, but I get what you're saying. Yeah,
you're right.
You don't want to do that.
I don't want to do that. I'm not crazy.
So just like I don't want to run a marathon.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
fair. You know what? I think some people might beg to differ that I'm wired a little bit differently. I guess I've got that maybe psychopath in me a little bit. That
absolutely
that pushes me, that I use for good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really cool thing to go through. And see, and that's like a lot of these guys that I follow, like a David Goggins or like a Jordan Peterson we were talking about before, like these guys,
Jocko Willings, these types of guys who are just
they're people of inspiration, right? Like David Goggins, like, I don't know, he doesn't really give a shit about how it impacts you. He's an inspiring dude because he works hard. You see what the human body is capable of because of him.
Yeah,
I'll never meet that guy. I'll never be on the same platform as him, but seeing what he's done and knowing that just another random stranger can go through the kind of shit that guy goes through makes what I've gone through seem like nothing. Like I see, you hear about that guy at SEALs camp or whatever, all that crazy stuff. And I'm like, shit, man, if this guy can go through some of that stuff, like, what's me running a marathon, right? Like, what is that? Like, like
you ever see yourself running an ultra marathon someday?
So I don't know.
Let's do the marathon first.
Yeah, let's do the marathon first. But what I will say, and I don't know if I brought this up to you, but I've gotten really into a couple, like Rich Roll is an ultra marathon guy. So I've watched a lot of his podcast. He's someone I'm very interested in right now because I think he's got a really cool perspective on life. Courtney Dauwalter. Jesse Itzler was one of my favorite authors before everything happened.
Yeah.
A lot of these ultra marathon type guys,
like the Cameron Haynes of the world.
Like you see these guys, like they're like the coolest dudes ever in my perspective, man. Like they're just like authentic, genuine, good people who treat their bodies really well. They're all a little bit off in their mind. Like they're just not normal. That's really cool to me, right? Yeah. And obviously I've never even run past 32K yet. So like this 42 next week might break down my body and kill me. I don't know. If I finish that 42 and feel great, like hell yeah, I could see myself doing more than that. I don't want to cap it.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to commit to anything just yet.
Fair enough, man. Hit the ground running. How could people get involved?
Yeah, there's lots of ways. I think right now, well, I don't know when you're going to release this. Our virtual run is starting next week.
Yep.
But check out our Instagram page at HTGR Canada, like Hit the Ground Running Canada.
Yeah.
Our TikTok page is the same tag as well, right. HTGR Canada.
Is there a way for okay, I'm gonna release this before
there you go.
The run happens.
Hell
okay?
Yeah.
You got commitment from me. All right.
On the pod, I love it.
It's gonna come out like before this run, okay?
Yeah.
And if I could tell anyone listening, can like at any running level, can you walk a 5K?
Hell yeah.
What's the minimum you could do to support this cause and do something for yourself at the same time?
Yeah, 100%. So if you want to support the cause, you can join in our virtual run. We've literally got 1K, 5K, 10K, half marathon, and full marathon. So whatever you want to run, sign up on our site, htgrcanada.com.
And we'll link that in the description and the show notes and everything, so everyone can easily go to htgrcanada.com.
Yeah, exactly. Boom. So yeah, check it out on there. You can easily sign up for the run. You can literally sign up until the last day. So we've opened it up for a full week.
Yeah.
Because it's virtual. That's kind of like the blessing and the curse, right?
Yeah.
Of having to do it virtual is we don't necessarily get to all see each other. I'm going to try to make it out to see as many people as I can.
But that's the power of social media, man. Now people could do it from anywhere. Anyone listening to this, man.
Yeah.
Carve out, I am actually, I don't want to hear any excuses. If this dude could get shot in the femoral artery less than a year ago and run a marathon, you should be able to run a kilometer.
Yeah.
8 kilometer. I'm not asking you to run a marathon because be kind of a hypocrite if I told you to do that. But just sign up, donate, be a part of the cause, and post about it on social media, man, because this thing's here to stick around and you want to be part of history.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is like, it's really cool that this is kind of our starting place. I think we've got so much room to grow. I know we're working on a couple community projects. Specifically with like anti-violence, going into work with some some of the younger generation to kind of prevent some of the trends that we've been seeing since COVID, but also just in our society right now, right? Like I was telling you earlier, there's a lot of crazy shit, man. I've heard about other kids who've gone through the same thing that I went through last year recently, right? It sucks to see that that's a trend that's becoming more popular right now, and I want to do what I can with this organization, my story, and some of my key partners to try to eradicate that problem at the source. So I'm really excited to see the difference that we can make and the growth that we can get out of this and how many people we can end up helping out in the process, right?
And I love it, man. It's almost arming yourself with your trauma.
Yeah, 100%.
It's taking it and using it as a weapon.
Yeah, dude, it's a competitive advantage that I have that other people don't, right? Yeah. I've been saying that from the start. I think it's such a... You can, and that's like, it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to get shot 3 times.
No, you absolutely
right?
do not.
Like it's that you need to be comfortable being vulnerable and taking your biggest shortcomings and your biggest challenges in life and using them as power, right?
Absolutely.
Because so many people empathize and understand what you're going through. So many more people than you think, right? So it's being open about everything, being transparent, and using that instead of letting it eat at you and kill you, right? So
we've talked about this in the past, Peacock. We talked about the fact that putting yourself out there and being vulnerable and like taking that step is a really uncomfortable thing.
It sucks,
and it's something that you have decided to lean into and obviously are really doing something positive with it, but that doesn't make it any easier. So people have to recognize that you telling your story again and again, and you're going to be telling it for the rest of your life. It's a responsibility. It's like something now that you kind of can't shy away from, and that takes a toll on you, right? But I think you've gotten so much positive feedback and you've got so much momentum with all of this now for the positive. And I think, if I can speak for you here, correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact that it's impacting other people's lives in a positive way gives you a mission, again, bigger than yourself. That drives you.
It makes it all
it's
worth
not
it,
about the marathon. Don't think for a second that this is about running 42K.
The marathon is straight selfish. That is 100% for me. If it inspires you, that's cool. Like that makes me happy. But this is entirely for me. I would have done this shit regardless of whether or not I started up, hit the ground running. Like this is for me. This is me showing to myself that all this time and effort we put in had not even a culmination, because I think that this is going to go so much further than that. But it just shows me that I'm back. You know, I'm where I'm at. This dude.
Fire me up, man. One last thing I kind of want to touch on with that vulnerability thing. How do you deal with that though on like a day-to-day basis? Because I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast or like even follow us on social media or that kind of stuff. They're like, how could I do that? How could I be a little bit more like, I'd love to start a business, start this, start a podcast, do this and that, but like they're a little stuck with like the vulnerability bit, and I think like we'd agree that that's kind of the hump, right?
I would have had this, sorry, I walked away from the mic there. I would have had the same exact response before going into everything. Even when I started with being a little bit more open about my story, you're always stressed out, man. Like I was maybe stressed out for a few different reasons. I maybe was worried that the wrong person would hear this and I'd end up on some sort of target list that I didn't want to be on. Again, I don't even know who to look out for, but everyone's got their own reasons to be vulnerable, but there's so much power in that vulnerability, right? It's going out there and understanding, like right now, your biggest fear is that you didn't take that step, right? Is that you didn't start being a little more active on social media and start that business you've always been thinking about. One day, your biggest regret is going to be that you didn't do that, right? And I think that's so important to realize that you have to pick one. Do you want to have regret, or do you want to you have to deal with being a little bit uncomfortable and being a little bit vulnerable, right?
Or the chance of quote unquote failure, or being embarrassed, or being judged, or being
use it
made
to your
fun
advantage,
of.
Man.
That's all. Like, that's what I love about you, man. It's like that you've leaned in on it. You own your story.
You have to.
You love yourself.
You have to.
And that's
even your shortcomings, your flaws. Like I don't know, man. I'm probably one of the most embarrassing guys that I know, and I'm sure most of my friends can attest to that, right? I do so much stupid stuff on a daily basis that I'll rip on myself for.
We
right?
all do.
You have to, but that's it. Everybody comes into these places, and I'm guilty of it myself, thinking that you're so much better, you're so great, and you think that because you don't put yourself out there, and you're not, you don't put yourself at risk for any sort of shortcomings or failure. And at the end of the day, like what the hell quality of life is that, right? You're gonna be scooting by. You're just going to live a regular life, and you're going to live a life filled with a ton of regret. And why, like in my mind, I would have rather died the night that I did than have come back and just regretted it, right? Like if I was to look back, I'm thinking about 60-year-old Brandon. 60-year-old Brandon looks back on 24-year-old Brandon. And if I didn't use this to do something better, I would have hated that guy, right? I would have wondered if it was even worth that second opportunity. So seriously, like if that's your only obstacle, maybe it sounds a little insensitive because it is tough for sure, but get over it,
Dude, you just spoke to the reason why this podcast exists and why it's called It's Not That Deep.
Yeah.
Like it really isn't.
It's not, man.
Don't overthink things so much. Don't assign so much importance to them. Float through life with a little bit more of that, what you just described, your deathbed. Just think about that guy and like what he or she would regret. And just go for things, man. Just ape it. I always say, just ape things. Just go for it. Just break through that wall, and like you're not gonna be good at first. I've told you about my first podcast. I hated it. I'm so critical of it.
Dude, I know nothing about what I'm doing, right? I've learned so much just in 2 months. Like it's not easy. It's gonna be hard, but you gotta realize that everybody going through those same steps, it's just as difficult for them as it was for you, or for Joe Rogan. I'm sure it was just as hard for him, and now look where he is, right? It's not gonna be easy off the start, but that's the times you gotta enjoy, right? Relish that shit. Like I don't know. That's we're both very passionate about that. I can see.
Absolutely, man. I could think of no better way to end this podcast. I'm fired up right now. I feel like I should go for a run or something right now.
Let's do it.
Let's go for it. Where could people find you on social media, man? Where could people? I know we kind of already talked about HTGR, but let's remind them where they can find everything that you're promoting right now. And
100%. So like I said before, Instagram at HTGR Canada. TikTok is the same thing at HTGR Canada. And
his TikTok is fire, by the way.
My TikTok is in the studio, so that's why he says it's fire. But it looks great. I think we've got more consistent viewers because they like the background or something. We look more professional.
I think it's your story, but
then my Instagram is at Peacock_Brandon. I don't really post too much on there in terms of content, so follow HTGR Canada. But yeah, like we post a couple kind of updates every once in a while on the Instagram too that are pretty cool. So check out both.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. For everyone listening, just remember, it's not that deep.